Imagine swimming in the ancient seas of the Devonian, nearly 360 million years ago. The water is calm, schools of armored fish drift by, and for a moment it feels safe. But then, a shadow looms, a massive head encased in bone plates, jaws that snap like guillotines. You've just come face to face with Dunkleosteus, one of the most terrifying predators ever to rule Earth's oceans. At nearly 30 feet long, Dunkleosteus was no ordinary fish. Its skull wasn't made of cartilage but thick armor, and its bite force could crush through the toughest shells. Instead of teeth, it wielded razor-sharp bone plates, shearing flesh and bone in a single strike. Prey stood no chance. The moment its jaws opened, they slammed shut with the speed of a mousetrap, pulling victims into a nightmare of steel-like power. This was a time before sharks rose to dominance, yet Dunkleosteus was already redefining what it meant to be an apex predator. It didn't just hunt, it annihilated, leaving behind seas littered with shattered shells and torn remains. To swim in its world was to live in constant fear, for every ripple in the water could be your last. But what made Dunkleosteus so deadly? How did it become the undisputed king of the Devonian seas? And could it truly be called the most dangerous fish to ever live? Today, we dive into the story of a predator with jaws that shook prehistory itself. The Devonian seas stretched wide, a world teeming with armored fish, primitive sharks, and strange coral reefs that shaped the first true marine ecosystems. Beneath these waters lurked a predator unlike any the planet had ever seen, its armored head cutting through the dim light like a living fortress. For smaller creatures drifting nearby, survival hinged on sensing its presence early. Yet Dunkleosteus moved with the quiet certainty of a killer. When it struck, the ocean seemed to split apart. Its jaws opened in an instant, powered by a system of muscles and joints that created explosive speed, snapping shut with bone-crushing force. Shells that would resist nearly anything else cracked like fragile glass, and flesh tore cleanly in a single motion. Victims often never even knew what struck them. The kill was faster than their reflexes. This predator did not rely on rows of teeth like the sharks that would later dominate the oceans. Instead, Dunkleosteus carried massive bony plates sharpened by constant grinding against one another, forming natural blades honed with each bite. These shearing edges were capable of slicing through both armor and soft tissue alike, a weapon that never dulled as long as it fed. Evolution had armed it not with fragility, but with tools of brutal efficiency. For those who swam the Devonian seas, every encounter was a gamble. Smaller placoderms might huddle together, their armored heads turned outward in a vain attempt to deter attack. Yet Dunkleosteus was far too large, far too powerful, to be discouraged by formations. When hunger pressed, it lunged into the midst of them, scattering schools with a single sweep of its head, seizing prey with unstoppable jaws. Its body was not built for elegance, but for dominance. Heavy plates armored the head and thorax, leaving the rear flexible enough for powerful thrusts. This combination allowed it to surge forward suddenly, closing distances that prey thought safe. Once within reach, escape was a dream. Those jaws would slam shut and the hunt would be over in seconds. The seas bore silent witness to its reign. Fossils tell us of shattered shells, crushed remains, evidence of a predator that fed on nearly anything it desired. Even other Dunkleosteus were not safe. Marks on bones suggest cannibalism, proof that hunger and power respected no boundaries. In these waters, everything was food, and Dunkleosteus ruled through sheer necessity. Its bite force has been calculated to rival the most powerful predators of all time, reaching thousands of pounds per square inch. To put it in perspective, that is stronger than most crocodiles today, and enough to snap bone as though it were driftwood. Few animals in history could boast such weaponry, and fewer still commanded their ecosystems as completely. Dunkleosteus was not merely a hunter, it was a phenomenon, and yet, like all rulers, its reign carried weight. Growing so large demanded constant feeding, and every strike had to bring results. Hunger was both its weapon and its weakness, driving it to patrol vast ranges in search of prey. The Devonian seas were rich, but resources never infinite, and Dunkleosteus lived in constant tension between dominance and survival. Still, for millions of years, it maintained its throne. In that time, oceans evolved, reefs flourished, and new species emerged, but none could challenge the armored giant's supremacy. It was the first true terror of the deep, a reminder that long before sharks or whales, the seas had already crowned a king whose jaws redefined the meaning of fear. Dunkleosteus did not announce itself with splashes or warning signs. To its prey, the waters felt calm, safe even, until the shadow appeared overhead. Then came the rush, a blur of armored head and gaping jaws, the kind of strike that left no chance for reaction. In a single heartbeat, the silence of the Devonian Ocean turned into a scene of violent finality. Schools of armored fish scattered in terror, their bodies glinting like bronze coins in fractured sunlight. Some darted into reef crevices, others swam upward into the glare, but Dunkleosteus was relentless. Its jaws opened wide, bony plates gleaming, and with a single snap, it cut through the slowest of the group. The kill was as swift as it was absolute, leaving behind fragments that drifted like confetti in the current. Unlike the predators that would one day chase with speed, Dunkleosteus excelled at ambush and precision. Its body was powerful, yet heavy, armored in a way that made constant pursuit impossible. Instead, it conserved energy, hovering with patience until the perfect moment presented itself. Then, with explosive force, it surged forward and ended the chase before it began. This strategy was more than instinct. It was survival refined over millions of years. Energy was costly for such a massive beast, and failure meant hunger pressing harder. Every strike was calculated, each movement a gamble it could not afford to lose. The Devonian seas, though abundant, were also crowded, and Dunkleosteus had to command every advantage to maintain its reign. Its rivals were few, but not non-existent. Smaller placoderms had armor, early sharks had speed, and swarms had safety in numbers. Yet none of these defenses were enough. Dunkleosteus's shearing bite turned armor into fragments, speed into panic, and numbers into chaos. Its dominance was not simply a product of size, but of the unmatched weaponry forged in its head. Even among its own kind, there was no true safety. Fossil records suggest that Dunkleosteus may have turned on each other, whether in times of scarcity or simple territorial conflict. To encounter another giant meant a clash of jaws, bone plate against bone plate, a battle as brutal as any staged by later predators. Cannibalism was not a weakness, but a testament to how absolute survival was in this ancient world. The Devonian seas earned the title of Age of Fishes for their sheer variety, but at the top of that pyramid sat Dunkleosteus. It was not simply another creature, it was the reason fear permeated the water. To live in those oceans was to exist under the constant threat of its shadow, a force of nature that shaped the behavior of everything around it. Even its appearance was designed to intimidate. The massive head plates gave it a look of living armor, a submarine forged by evolution long before steel. Its eyes, set forward, suggested a focus uncommon among fish, a predator's gaze that tracked with eerie precision. To see Dunkleosteus was to understand that escape was no longer possible, and so it reigned, not through endless chase or dramatic displays, but through inevitability. Wherever it drifted, silence followed, a silence born from fear. Every creature of the Devonian carried its presence in their instincts, for Dunkleosteus was more than predator. It was the embodiment of dominance itself. Dunkleosteus hung in the dim water, its armored head angled slightly downward, eyes locked on the movement below. A shoal of smaller fish shimmered in the filtered light, oblivious to the presence of their executioner. With a sudden pulse of muscle, it surged forward. The water exploded with motion, tented jaws opening wide, and the first victim vanished in a blur of shattered scales. The power of its bite came not only from brute force, but from a unique system of levers and joints. The skull plates worked like engineered machinery, allowing the jaws to snap open at lightning speed and then slam shut with devastating impact. In less than a fraction of a second, the prey was pierced, crushed, and drawn into the armored mouth. This was evolution's engineering at its most lethal. The seafloor bore witness to its dominance. Crushed shells littered the sand, broken pieces of placoderm armor, evidence of meals past. Scavengers picked at leftovers, worms and small arthropods feasting on scraps too tiny for the giant to bother with. Nothing went to waste, and Dunkleosteus stood at the center of this recycling system, a grim provider of life through death. It hunted in both shallow reefs and deeper basins, able to adapt to different habitats with ease. In the shallows, it ambushed from behind coral formations, rushing out to seize unwary prey. In deeper waters, it hovered in twilight, striking at anything that dared to cross its path. Wherever it went, the rules of survival shifted, for no creature was beyond its reach. Its armored head gave it an appearance of invulnerability, but that armor served another purpose. By grinding its bony plates against each other, Dunkleosteus kept the edges sharp, like self-sharpening blades forged from bone. Each bite not only killed, but honed its weapons further, ensuring that they never dulled across years of predation. This was a predator that grew sharper with every hunt. Prey evolved strategies to survive, yet none proved reliable. Some species grew thicker armor, but Dunkleosteus's jaws cracked them anyway. Others formed larger schools, hoping numbers might confuse the predator, but the giant simply scattered them with a single charge. Even speed was useless when the attack itself happened faster than the eye could register. In the Devonian seas, there was no true defense. The only creatures that seemed to pose a threat were other Dunkleosteus. When two giants crossed paths, the water turned violent. Head plates clashed, jaws snapped, and scars marked the aftermath of brutal encounters. Sometimes one retreated bloodied, but alive. Other times cannibalism followed, the victor feeding on its own kind as though dominance itself demanded proof. For smaller creatures, these clashes offered rare reprieve. While two giants battled, schools slipped away, and the sea briefly belonged to someone else. Yet the moment the fight ended, balance was restored, and the shadow of Dunkleosteus resumed its place over the ecosystem. To witness such a battle was to see the raw truth of survival. Power, consuming power. Even in its supremacy, Dunkleosteus was bound to the tides of change. The Devonian world shifted constantly, with reefs rising and falling, sea levels climbing and receding. New predators emerged and ecosystems reshaped around them. Yet for millions of years, none could dislodge the armored king from its throne. Its design was too perfect, its reign too absolute. For those who swam in its world, the Devonian seas were a place of constant fear. Every ripple might signal the armored shadow. Every glint of light could mean jaws closing in. Dunkleosteus was not just another predator. It was the terror that defined an age, the executioner that shaped the evolution of everything it hunted. The ocean darkened as clouds drifted above, dimming the beams of sunlight that pierced the waves. For the smaller fish below, this shift in light created confusion, scattering their schools into uneven clusters. Dunkleosteus took advantage of the moment. It glided silently, armored head reflecting the faint glow, and with a sudden thrust it burst into the panicked swarm. One crushing snap of its jaws ended the chaos in an instant. Its prey rarely saw the predator approach. The body of Dunkleosteus was not streamlined like modern sharks, but its armored front and flexible rear gave it surprising agility when it mattered most. It could hover nearly motionless, a hulking shape among the shadows, and then unleash a devastating burst of speed at precisely the right moment. Its hunting strategy was not to chase endlessly, but to strike with brutal efficiency. The power behind its bite was unmatched. When its jaws clamped down, the bony plates worked like chisels, slicing and crushing at the same time. Fossil reconstructions suggest a bite force exceeding 4,000 pounds per square inch, comparable to or greater than the deadliest crocodiles of today. Imagine the strength of steel blades snapping shut with the speed of a trap, and you begin to understand why nothing survived once caught. Other predators of the Devonian seas lacked this lethal combination of speed and crushing strength. Primitive sharks had teeth, but not the raw power. Smaller placoderms had armor, but not the size to dominate. Dunkleosteus alone combined both defense and offense into a single body, a living war machine that could repel attackers and destroy prey with equal certainty. It was evolution's perfect balance of fortress and weapon. The ecosystem bent around its presence. Swarms of fish changed their behavior, hugging reefs or staying close to shallow waters in a desperate attempt to avoid the giant. Trilobites scurried into crevices, sensing the vibrations of its approach. Even other armored placoderms shifted their ranges, creating invisible borders that centered on the predator's territory. Dunkleosteus was not only a hunter, it was a force that shaped where and how other creatures lived. Fossils reveal more than just bones. They tell stories of violence etched into armor. Grooves carved into placoderm plates speak of strikes from jaws too strong to resist. Even bones of Dunkleosteus itself carry scars, signs of battles between giants. These marks are silent witnesses to an ocean where survival meant living in the constant shadow of its power. Cannibalism made it even more fearsome. Evidence suggests Dunkleosteus sometimes consumed its own kind, whether from hunger, territorial conflict, or opportunism. To swim near another of equal size meant risking everything, for the line between rival and meal was thin. In this merciless sea, even the kings were not safe from one another. The image of Dunkleosteus is often reconstructed as monstrous, but in truth it was a masterpiece of adaptation. Its armored skull was not just protection, but also the anchor for a biting system unparalleled in prehistory. Its bony blades were not clumsy tools, but precision instruments honed over millions of years. Every detail of its anatomy whispered of a predator designed to rule. And rule it did. For millions of years, Dunkleosteus dominated the Devonian oceans, shaping ecosystems with its hunger, its power, and its very presence. It was not just the most dangerous fish of its age. It may well have been the most dangerous fish of all time. To encounter it was not to face a mere creature, but to confront inevitability itself, a predator perfected by nature long before humans ever walked the earth. The water grew still, as though the ocean itself held its breath. A small group of placoderms drifted in formation, their armored heads gleaming like bronze shields in the filtered light. For a moment their defenses seemed unbreakable. Then the shadow of Dunkleosteus swept across them. The giant did not hesitate. Its jaws opened wide, and with a single snap, one of the armored fish shattered, the fragments spinning downward in a slow spiral of defeat. This was how Dunkleosteus ruled, not through endless chases, but through calculated terror. It had no need to waste energy pursuing prey for long distances. Instead, it struck like a thunderclap, overwhelming any defense with a single crushing bite. In a sea filled with armored creatures, it was the predator designed to break armor itself. Nature had given it the perfect counter to its own age. Every detail of its head was built for violence. The bony plates that formed its jaws acted as shears, slicing through shell and flesh alike. Muscles anchored to its skull created explosive leverage, opening the mouth with astonishing speed before snapping it shut. This combination meant that even the toughest defenses were reduced to shards in seconds. Few predators in history possessed such elegant brutality. Its body, though less protected than its head, was built for power. The front half was heavily armored, a fortress against strikes, while the rear was flexible, allowing bursts of propulsion. When it surged forward, the effect was devastating. Prey rarely had time to flee, and those that did often swam straight into the waiting arms of another Dunkleosteus. The Devonian seas carried echoes of its hunger. Fossils show evidence of broken remains scattered across ancient seafloors, a trail of destruction written in bone. Shell fragments tell the story of prey that never escaped, while bite marks on fellow Dunkleosteus reveal a predator that knew no limits, Not even kinship could shield one from its appetite. For millions of years, it dominated without rival. Primitive sharks lurked in the shadows, but none grew large enough to threaten the armored giant. Other placoderms had weapons of their own, but none matched the efficiency of its killing strike. Dunkleosteus stood alone at the top, a predator perfected for its time, an apex unlike any before it. Its range shaped evolution itself. Creatures developed thicker armor, faster swimming speeds, and new strategies of evasion. Yet no matter how they adapted, Dunkleosteus remained supreme. Each defense was only temporary, each tactic undone by the inevitability of its bite. In this ancient arms race, it was always one step ahead, forcing life to change around its hunger. And yet, even for the mightiest, survival was not guaranteed. Dunkleosteus lived in a world of constant change, where climate shifts altered seas and ecosystems collapsed under shifting currents. Its dominance was real, but fragile, balanced on the constant need to feed and the shifting ground of evolution. It was the king of its time, but no throne lasts forever. Still, while it ruled, its presence defined an era. To swim in the Devonian was to live in its shadow, to feel the weight of its gaze even when it was unseen. Dunkleosteus was more than predator. It was the living embodiment of inevitability, a reminder that in nature, power writes the laws of survival. For millions of years, it enforced those laws with jaws that no creature could resist. The currents shifted gently across the Devonian seafloor, carrying fine sediment that swirled into faint clouds. In this haze, Dunkleosteus drifted like a living shadow, its massive armored head catching the faint glimmers of filtered sunlight. Smaller fish darted nervously, sensing vibrations they could not identify, and then froze in terror as the giant opened its jaws. The snap was instantaneous. A soundless impact felt more than heard, and another life ended before it had begun to flee. To understand its dominance, one must look closely at its design. Unlike modern fish, Dunkleosteus lacked true teeth. Instead, it wielded sharpened, bony plates that functioned like cleavers, honed through constant use. These plates met with such force that they acted as blades capable of cutting through armor and bone with terrifying precision. With each bite, the edges ground against one another, sharpening themselves for the next kill. This was a predator that grew sharper through every act of violence. Its eyes, large and forward-facing, offered a predatory focus rare in fish of its time. These eyes pierced the dim waters, locking onto prey with unblinking certainty. Once targeted, escape was a near impossibility. Dunkleosteus did not chase endlessly. It calculated, struck with speed, and finished with devastating efficiency. In this way, it conserved energy while ensuring survival, a strategy perfected by millions of years of adaptation. The seafloor told stories of its hunger. Fossilized remains reveal bite marks, carved deep into armor, grooves etched by unstoppable jaws. Even among its own kind, evidence shows brutal confrontations, scars, shattered plates, and bones bearing the unmistakable signature of cannibalism. Dunkleosteus was not bound by loyalty or restraint. In times of scarcity, rivals became meals, and the cycle of survival turned inward. This merciless existence shaped the ecosystem itself. Smaller fish developed swifter bodies, trilobites hugged the seafloor more tightly, and placoderms grew thicker armor, yet none of these adaptations offered true safety. Dunkleosteus shattered armor, scattered schools, and dragged prey from hiding places with the same terrifying consistency. Every innovation in defense was only a temporary measure against a predator designed to overcome all barriers. Its reign as apex predator extended across vast seas, from shallow reefs to deeper basins. In coral habitats, it ambushed prey with sudden bursts of speed. In open waters, it hovered like a drifting fortress, striking at anything unfortunate enough to wander near. Its versatility made it omnipresent, a threat no creature could truly escape. The Devonian world belonged to it in a way few predators ever claimed, and yet, even perfection carries burdens. Its immense size demanded constant feeding, and hunger was a relentless companion. A failed strike meant wasted energy, a risk Dunkleosteus could ill afford. The predator lived on a knife's edge, balancing dominance with desperation. Its hunger defined its life as much as its power did, driving it endlessly across ancient seas in search of sustenance. For millions of years, it endured, carving its legacy into the very fabric of prehistory. It was not just another predator in the evolutionary record, it was a turning point. Dunkleosteus represented the first truly monstrous fish, a creature that redefined what oceans could be. Long before the rise of sharks, before whales and reptiles claimed dominion, it ruled the waters with jaws unmatched in power and precision. Those who imagine the Devonian seas must picture not just reefs and armored fish, but the silence that followed when Dunkleosteus approached. Fear itself became part of the environment, shaping how creatures moved, fed, and lived. To be a fish in those waters was to live with the constant awareness that the armored giant might strike at any moment. This was the reality of a world shaped by a single predator's shadow. A ripple spread through the water as Dunkleosteus angled its armored head downward, preparing for another strike. The school of fish below sensed the disturbance, scattering into chaotic swirls. But it was already too late. With explosive force, the predator surged forward, bony jaws opening wide. In the blink of an eye, they slammed shut on an unlucky victim, splitting it apart with the precision of shears. The ocean stilled again, silent except for drifting fragments of scale and shell. Every encounter played out in this pattern: patience, calculation, and sudden violence. Dunkleosteus did not waste energy chasing tirelessly like modern sharks. It relied on its ambush strategy, using stealth and sudden propulsion to overwhelm prey. The siphon of water expelled from its body allowed for quick bursts of speed, and once the gap closed, no defense could withstand the crushing power of its bite. Its armored skull, composed of interlocking plates, gave it a menacing appearance. These plates were more than protection. They provided leverage for the jaw system, a deadly combination of speed and strength. Opening its mouth created a suction effect, drawing prey inward just before the crushing closure. To smaller fish, it must have felt as though the ocean itself turned into a trap, swallowing them whole. The efficiency of its feeding was remarkable. Unlike predators that left remains, Dunkleosteus consumed nearly everything it captured. Flesh, soft tissue, and even parts of armored exoskeletons were shredded and swallowed. The bits that escaped drifted downward, feeding scavengers and smaller creatures, weaving Dunkleosteus into the very cycle of life and death that defined the Devonian seas. But even with such dominance, it was a creature bound by constant hunger. At lengths of up to 30 feet, its massive body demanded vast amounts of food to sustain itself. The predator's success relied not on luxury, but necessity. Each day, it hunted tirelessly, driven forward by an instinct to feed or die. Its reign as apex predator came with a relentless price. Competition was scarce but real. Other placoderms, armored and fierce, prowled the same waters. Early sharks darted quickly through the seas, faster but far weaker. Dunkleosteus stood apart in its balance of size, armor, and weaponry. Where others specialized, it embodied versatility, a fortress and a blade, patient hunter and ruthless killer. This made it unchallengeable, a predator no rival could surpass. Even its own species could not escape its wrath. Cannibalism, suggested by fossil remains, shows that Dunkleosteus turned on its kin when prey was scarce. These confrontations must have been terrifying spectacles, two giants colliding in violent clashes. The victor fed, the loser vanished into its rival's armored jaws. In a world of survival without mercy, even kinship meant little. The Devonian seas, often called the Age of Fishes, were crowded with armored species, early corals, and bizarre marine life. Yet above them all, Dunkleosteus reigned supreme. Its power reshaped ecosystems, its hunger dictated behavior, and its presence defined the very experience of life in those waters. To exist beneath the waves was to live under its dominion. For millions of years, it endured. Its shadow passed across reefs, shallow coasts, and deeper basins, unopposed in its supremacy. Each strike reaffirmed its place at the pinnacle of its world. Dunkleosteus was not just a predator. It was the living embodiment of inevitability, a creature that made survival itself feel uncertain. To meet it was to meet the certainty of death. The ocean floor shimmered with particles of silt disturbed by the sudden rush of water. Dunkleosteus hovered just above, its massive armored skull tilting slightly as its gaze tracked another potential meal. A school of smaller placoderms shifted nervously in the dim light, their bodies flashing metallic hues as they tried to scatter in all directions. But scattering was futile. The giant chose one, and in less than a heartbeat its jaws snapped shut with a soundless finality. The bite was unlike anything in nature. When Dunkleosteus opened its mouth, a vacuum effect pulled prey closer, leaving them with no hope of escape. Then the bony plates slammed together, their edges sharp as blades, crushing and slicing simultaneously. A single strike could cleave a creature in two, the broken halves drifting apart in a trail of crimson clouds. For the Devonian seas, this predator was death incarnate. Even the largest prey offered little challenge. Some armored fish grew heavy plates over their bodies, an evolutionary shield against danger. Yet Dunkleosteus was built to destroy such armor. The power of its jaws shattered shells that seemed impenetrable, reducing defenses into fragments in moments. To evolve in its world meant adapting not for victory, but for survival long enough to avoid its reach. Its dominance extended beyond hunting. Dunkleosteus shaped the very structure of the ecosystem. Prey changed migration patterns, gathering in areas with more cover. Some developed behaviors to stay close to reefs or burrow into the sand. The giant's presence forced evolution into new directions, turning fear into a driver of life. It was not only a killer, it was an architect of survival strategies. But Dunkleosteus itself was no tireless pursuer. Its body, though powerful, was not built for endless speed. Instead, it relied on explosive bursts of motion, conserving energy in between. It hovered silently, armored head angled toward opportunity, and only when certainty arrived did it strike. This patience was its greatest weapon, a discipline that made its hunts efficient and deadly. Fossil evidence shows that this predator left behind shattered remains of prey scattered across seafloors. Marks etched deep into armor plates tell of crushing bites, grooves that cut clean through bone. Some fossils even reveal fragments of Dunkleosteus within the stomachs of its own kind, evidence of cannibalism. The predator was not bound by any rule except hunger, and hunger spared no one. The image of two Dunkleosteus clashing must have been awe-inspiring, armored heads colliding, jaws snapping with the force of guillotines, the water churning into chaos as titans battled for dominance. These encounters were rare but decisive. The loser vanished into the jaws of the victor, its existence reduced to fragments consumed in silence. Even among its kind, the law of survival was absolute. Its rules spanned millions of years. During this time, coral reefs expanded, trilobites scurried across the seabed, and early sharks multiplied in the shadows. Yet none challenged its supremacy. Dunkleosteus was the undisputed monarch of the Devonian seas, a predator perfected by evolution long before reptiles or mammals claimed their thrones. Its reign was measured not in centuries, but in ages. Every creature that swam in those waters carried its presence in their instincts. The faintest shadow could trigger panic. The smallest vibration could spark flight. To live in the Devonian seas was to know Dunkleosteus as an ever-present force, the unseen terror that dictated when and where survival was possible. Its legacy was written not only in fossils, but in the very fear that shaped evolution. The waters shimmered faintly as beams of light filtered down from the surface, breaking into golden shafts that painted the seafloor. Small creatures, jawless fish, trilobites, and early invertebrates moved cautiously through the haze. Then came the silence, the kind that pressed heavy on the water itself. Out of the gloom, Dunkleosteus drifted forward, its armored skull gleaming like a fragment of living rock. In an instant, the calm dissolved into terror. With a surge of power, the predator opened its jaws wide, the motion faster than the eye could track. The sudden vacuum dragged its victim inward, and the bony plates slammed together with crushing finality. A flash of scales, a cloud of crimson, and the sea absorbed yet another life. For creatures of the Devonian, there was no warning, no chance, just the certainty that the shadow above meant death. Its bite was not simply strong, it was transformative. Calculations suggest Dunkleosteus generated pressures rivaling the deadliest predators in history, enough to shear through bone, armor, and even other Dunkleosteus. Unlike sharks with endless rows of teeth, it had permanent bone blades, sharpened constantly by grinding against one another. Each bite made its weapons deadlier, turning feeding into a cycle of self-perfection. The body that carried these jaws was as formidable as the weapons themselves. Nearly 30 feet of armored predator, front half encased in bone, rear flexible enough for bursts of propulsion. This design meant it could withstand attacks while still striking with deadly accuracy. Its silhouette, part fortress, part blade, was a signal of dominance that no creature could ignore. Its impact on the ecosystem was immense. Prey species adjusted, developing thicker shells, swifter reflexes, or new strategies of hiding. Schools moved in tighter formations, hoping numbers might confuse the hunter. Yet none of these defenses truly worked. Dunkleosteus always found a way to cut through, scatter, and consume. It was not just a predator, it was the pressure that shaped evolution itself. Even within its own ranks, survival was precarious. When food grew scarce, Dunkleosteus turned to its kin. The fossil record reveals bite marks carved into the bones of its own species, silent evidence of cannibalism. This was not cruelty, but necessity. In a world where hunger ruled, even giants fed on giants. Each encounter with another of its kind was a gamble of life or death. Clashes between Dunkleosteus must have been spectacles of raw power, two armored titans colliding, jaws snapping with force enough to shatter bone, the sea churning in violence. The victor fed, the loser disappeared, absorbed into the cycle of hunger. These confrontations reinforced its role not just as a predator of the weak, but as a judge among equals. For millions of years, Dunkleosteus remained the terror of the Devonian seas. Primitive sharks lingered in its shadow, smaller placoderms scattered before it, and invertebrates fled its looming form. No rival could claim its throne, no competitor could dethrone it. Its supremacy stretched across oceans, making it the first true king of the seas long before whales or reptiles took their turn. Its reign was not eternal, yet its legacy was profound. By dominating its ecosystem so completely, it pushed evolution toward new paths. Creatures grew swifter, smarter, and more adaptive in response to its presence. The ripple of its influence carried forward through time, leaving echoes in every predator that followed. Dunkleosteus was more than a killer. It was a milestone in the history of life. The reef ahead teemed with life, its primitive corals swaying gently as currents washed through the structures. Small armored fish slipped between the pillars, feeding in safety they believed unbreakable. But lurking beyond the coral edge, Dunkleosteus hovered in silence, its armored skull angled downward, waiting. When the time was right, it propelled itself forward with a sudden burst, smashing through the reef shadows. In one snap, the illusion of safety shattered along with the body of a victim. Its ambushes relied on patience as much as power. Dunkleosteus knew the ocean rewarded those who conserved energy. Unlike the fast-moving sharks that would one day replace it, this predator survived by minimizing effort. It let the sea deliver prey to its reach, conserving its strength until the precise moment. Then, with explosive speed, it struck, leaving no time for escape. Each kill carried with it an almost mechanical efficiency. The jaws did not simply close. They crushed and sliced in one motion, turning prey into fragments of flesh and armor. What was not swallowed drifted downward, feeding worms, scavengers, and tiny arthropods. Its meals became entire ecosystems of secondary life, its violence creating nourishment for countless others. Dunkleosteus was not just a predator, it was an engine that redistributed energy through the sea. The Devonian seas echoed with its influence. Fossil evidence reveals prey species evolving thicker armor, yet even this adaptation offered little hope. Dunkleosteus's shearing jaws could split shells like clay. Others developed speed, but the predator's suction-based strikes overcame even quick reflexes. Nothing endured unchallenged, and so evolution turned desperately in new directions under its shadow. Its own body reflected compromises of survival. The armored front served as both weapon and shield, a living fortress, yet the rear remained flexible, allowing thrust and propulsion when needed. This balance of rigidity and movement created a form unlike any other predator of its time, a floating fortress capable of sudden bursts of violence. To creatures of the Devonian it must have seemed invincible. Still, hunger pressed endlessly. At nearly 30 feet long, Dunkleosteus required vast amounts of food to sustain its bulk. Each successful strike bought survival. Each failure meant weakness. This constant demand drove it forward day after day, a relentless cycle where rest was rare and feeding was life itself. Its reign was not one of comfort, but of endless need. The evidence of cannibalism shows how unforgiving this existence was. When prey grew scarce, Dunkleosteus turned on its own. A fellow predator was no different from any other meal, just another source of flesh and energy. These encounters, though rare, must have been titanic. Two armored giants clashing in silence, jaws snapping with unstoppable force until one fell to become sustenance for the other. Other creatures adapted their lives around this predator's presence. Small fish moved in tighter formations. Trilobites buried themselves deeper, and even early sharks avoided open waters where Dunkleosteus hunted. The predator's dominance rippled outward, forcing the ecosystem to respond. In this way, Dunkleosteus was not simply a killer, it was a designer, sculpting the behavior of entire communities. Its supremacy lasted millions of years. During that time, reefs expanded, seas shifted, and climates changed. Yet Dunkleosteus endured. No rival displaced it. No competitor unseated its dominance. It was an apex unlike any before it, a creature whose design was so efficient that it left no space for challengers. Its rule was absolute, its reign carved into the very rhythm of the Devonian seas. To imagine those waters is to imagine a silence broken only by sudden violence. A calm school of fish, a drifting shoal, a reef alive with activity, and then, without warning, the armored predator strikes. Every creature carried that possibility in its instincts, the knowledge that the shadow of Dunkleosteus could end them in a heartbeat. It was not only a predator, but a force of inevitability, the law of survival made flesh. The surface shimmered far above, but little light reached the depths where Dunkleosteus prowled. Here the water was colder, darker and quieter, a realm of twilight where sight was weak and instinct ruled. Smaller creatures hesitated in the gloom, relying on vibrations to guide their movements. But Dunkleosteus thrived in this shadowy world. Its armored skull drifted silently, eyes scanning, jaws ready to snap in less than a heartbeat. For those around it, the darkness itself became a weapon. When it attacked, the result was instant devastation. The powerful jaws opened with explosive speed, sucking water and prey alike into the crushing bite. Bone plates slammed together, cleaving shells and bodies with guillotine precision. The strike created a storm of fragments shimmering like glass shards as they sank. Scavengers moved in almost immediately, taking advantage of the scraps. Every kill sent ripples of nourishment through the ecosystem, weaving Dunkleosteus into the cycle of life and death as both destroyer and provider. Its dominance lay not just in strength, but in strategy. Dunkleosteus rarely wasted energy in long pursuits. Instead, it hovered, patient and deliberate, conserving its massive bulk for decisive strikes. When it moved, it did so with terrifying control, each burst measured, each attack ending in success. This was not mindless feeding, but a calculated pattern of survival that allowed it to endure for millions of years. The prey that faced it adapted in desperate ways. Trilobites burrowed deeper into the sediment, armored fish clustered tightly for defense, and early sharks darted with nervous speed. Yet every defense failed in time. Dunkleosteus cracked armor as though it were brittle clay, scattered schools with sudden charges, and used its suction strikes to neutralize speed. To evolve in its presence was to race against inevitability, and most lost. Even the predator itself was not safe from hunger's demands. Fossil evidence shows it turned on its own kind, jaws leaving deep gouges in the bones of rivals. Cannibalism was not rare accident, but survival, a grim reminder that no creature, no matter how mighty, escaped the rules of nature. These clashes must have been monumental. Two armored titans colliding in silence, jaws snapping with power strong enough to shatter each other's defenses. Its reign reshaped the seas. Entire communities altered behaviors to avoid its hunting grounds. Schools migrated differently, reefs served as sanctuaries that never truly guaranteed safety, and the open water carried an unspoken tension. Dunkleosteus was not simply a predator at the top of the food chain, it was the axis around which the Devonian ecosystem revolved. Fear of its presence structured life itself. The balance it struck between armor and flexibility was evolutionary genius. Its head and thorax plates gave unmatched defense, turning it into a living fortress. Yet its tail and body retained the power to drive sudden lunges. This dual design, fortress and blade, was unique, giving it an advantage unmatched by any other predator of its age. To creatures of the Devonian, it was less an animal than a moving fortress with the hunger of a storm. For millions of years, it persisted. Through shifting climates and evolving seas, Dunkleosteus held its throne. Primitive sharks remained in its shadow, never reaching the same dominance until long after the armored giant's reign. Coral reefs expanded and collapsed, trilobites diversified, but none could challenge its supremacy. It was the unshaken monarch of an age defined by fish, and its name was written into the silence of the seas. And yet its story also carried fragility. To be so large meant to live constantly at the edge of hunger. Every day required success. Every hunt carried stakes of survival. It was a ruler bound by the same law as all others: eat or be eaten. Even as it dominated, it walked a razor's edge between power and vulnerability. This paradox, absolute strength yet endless need, was the essence of Dunkleosteus. For those who imagine the Devonian oceans, the memory of Dunkleosteus must be central, not just as a predator, but as a symbol of nature's experiment with power. Long before sharks and whales, before reptiles rose on land, there was an armored monster that reigned in silence, reshaping life with every strike of its jaws. To encounter it was to face inevitability itself. The twilight zone muffled color into blues and grays, a canvas where movement mattered more than hue. Dunkleosteus held still long enough to become part of the water, then shifted a fraction, aligning its jaw hinge with the line of a drifting fish. The strike was so fast the current hadn't time to wrinkle. Impact first, awareness second. Its senses read the sea like a map. Pressure waves rolled across its skin, hinting at distance and direction. The faintest flick of a fin became coordinates. Sight anchored the final approach, wide eyes fixing on contrast and motion. When vision and vibration agreed, jaws followed with the certainty of a closing door. The jaw joint itself was a levered miracle. One motion unlocked two, a lightning-fast gape that created suction, and a crushing closure that converted momentum into shear. Bone plates met along honed ridges, cleaver against anvil, turning bodies into manageable pieces. Efficiency was not an accident. It was architecture. Shallows played to its patience. Coral pillars made blind corners, and Dunkleosteus turned those corners into traps. A single surge across a narrow alley converted safety into exposure, and prey that had relied on cover discovered cover could also cage. The reef learned the shape of fear. Open water asked for different tactics. There, the giant hung beneath schooling fish just outside their comfort radius, matching speed molecule for molecule. One feint sent the formation boiling into chaos. One lunge made chaos resolve into silence. In emptiness, power is geometry. Not every day brought abundance. Storms muddied the water, plankton thinned, roots shifted across provinces. Hunger stretched the distances between strikes, and that is when monsters meet. Two armored silhouettes closed, reading each other with the same equation: mass, angle, leverage, risk. Dominance was decided in seconds. Juveniles carried the blueprint in miniature. Small heads wore small plates, bites scaled to crustaceans and soft-bodied prey. Each chamber of growth expanded appetite and reach. Each season sharpened edges with practice. The ocean made room for them at every size, from reef skirts to basin ledges. Scars recorded the curriculum. Healed gouges traced where plates had met plates, where mistakes had extracted tuition. Survivors wore their lessons and hunted cleaner. In a sea that tested engineering by collision, refinement was written in bone. Seasons choreographed movement. Blooming plankton drew baitfish into ribbons that braided along coasts. Dunkleosteus followed those braids like roads. When temperatures dipped and clarity returned, it shifted deeper, trading color for predictability, gliding the isotherms where energy budgets balanced. Even stillness had strategy. Between kills it hovered, head slightly pitched, tail making micro-corrections against the drift. Scavengers orbited at respectful radii, knowing the edge between meal and mistake. A fragment fell, a dozen lives began. The web tightened around the absence. Rivals existed, but influence mattered more than opposition. Early sharks learned the corridor edges, feeding in the wake and avoiding the center. Armored kin learned to turn sideways, to present angles instead of surfaces. The predator did not just remove bodies, it sculpted behavior. Extinction did not arrive as a duel. It came as a ledger. Oxygen debts, reef rearrangements, the slow arithmetic of late Devonian crises. Roots failed, nurseries shrank, feasts thinned into errands. For a hunter calibrated to big returns, the margins narrowed until mastery could not pay its costs. And yet the blueprint persisted in echoes. Later jaws borrowed the physics, if not the plates. Later hunters adopted patience, suction, and shear. Whenever a modern predator lets the ocean deliver a victim, you can hear the old hinge opening in memory. Ancestry is a method, not a mask. Imagine being there on the day the water brightened after a long storm. Schools gathered, confidence returning, and the giant drifted beneath the silver. One more line drawn, one more law enforced, one more proof that in these seas, survival meant reading the pressure before the shadow arrived. The door opened, the door closed. The seas grew quieter as the Devonian age neared its end. Coral reefs collapsed in waves of extinction. Oxygen levels in the water dropped, and ecosystems strained under shifting climates. Even Dunkleosteus, the armored monarch of the oceans, felt the pressure. Hunger became harder to satisfy, prey scarcer with each passing season. For millions of years it had ruled without rival, yet even giants could not escape the laws of change. Slowly, the predator that once inspired fear across continents vanished into history, leaving behind only fossils carved with the marks of its ferocity. But extinction did not erase its legacy. Every modern squid, every shark, every cunning predator that prowls the seas today carries echoes of Dunkleosteus. Its jaws were the blueprint for power, its patience a lesson in survival, its reign a reminder that nature's experiments can be both beautiful and terrifying. To imagine facing it is to glimpse a world where danger was sudden, absolute, and inescapable. And so the story closes where it began, in the silence of ancient waters, broken by the snap of armored jaws. Dunkleosteus may be gone, but the seas remember. Its shadow lingers in every tale of prehistoric monsters, every fossil fragment pulled from stone, every question we ask about the first true kings of the oceans. If this journey into the Devonian seas has captured your imagination, don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with others who love ancient mysteries, and subscribe to the channel for more encounters with the giants of prehistory. The ocean still holds countless stories, and together we will dive deeper into the forgotten ages of life on Earth. Stay curious, stay adventurous, and join me again for the next ancient beast.